G'day guys, ZiggyD here, and today we've got 3 Ascendancy reveals for Path of Exile's Legion expansion. Champion, Slayer, and Berserker. Somebody call Gladiator because he's crying right now seeing some of these changes. Now Champion's only getting some minor changes I'll go over quickly, but both Slayer and Berserker are looking super competitive for melee, and there's also some subtle hype for bow builds, as much of the changes we're seeing here will work great for bows as well, which is interesting. Now, unlike Gladiator, Champion was arguably already in a reasonable spot, but there are some small buffs here. Master of Metals added physical damage for each impale on an enemy has been buffed by 50%, not bad. First to Strike, Last to Fall gained a 25% life heal when you first gain Adrenaline. This will do nothing if you're only using Adrenaline manually with a Blood Magic aura like we've seen for boss fights and stuff in the past, but it will work as a mild cheap death proc if you get damaged down to low life. It won't stop you from getting one shot, of course, but it will heal you up instantly if you're getting chunked by a bunch of smaller hits, so it could save you in some scenarios. And lastly, Inspirational got the added stages to picked up banners doubled to 40%. These two changes are kinda nice together if you're using War Banner for Adrenaline. Nothing major overall, but some nice minor buffs. It's worth mentioning that the Fortitude node is nerfed incidentally, as the Fortified Gem itself is getting a more damage multiplier, so there'll be less opportunity cost to using it in your main links depending on the numbers. Usage of this Fortified node has already dropped pretty low, but less people will use it now as well, depending on the number of the actual Fortified Gem. The Fortified node on Champ probably could have used a little extra spice, like some bonus Fortify effect or something like that. Everything else about the Ascendancy is still as good as it was, which was pretty good. I know it's not new and exciting, but Champion is still going to be a good Ascendancy. So now onto the big hype, Slayer. And it's got some big, meaty, bloody changes, and is looking like a real contender for a lot of builds. Firstly, the minor nodes have all been changed from two-hander attack damage to generic attack damage. The numbers are slightly smaller, but it's obviously much more versatile. The standalone, Overwhelm, used to be a stun node, but all of that stuff is now completely gone, and Overwhelm is now a fully crit-oriented node. I note on Stun that Jonathan on Bayclass podcast outlined that both attacks and physical damage are being buffed at the base mechanical level for stunning enemies, so losing a stun node here is not really a huge deal, I think, because stuns for these sorts of builds are going to be better anyway. Overwhelm now does some pretty interesting stuff. The second and third mods give crit multi per nearby enemy and lowers the crit multiplier of nearby enemies against you. These are relatively minor effects. 100% crit multiplier is a lot, but that's only when you're surrounded by at least 10 monsters, so it only really happens while clearing packs, which is when you don't really need that much crit multiplier since you're likely already destroying normal monsters. Against bosses, it's likely only going to be 10% crit multi a lot of the time unless there's adds, which is pretty negligible. Lowering crit multiplier of nearby enemies against you is a nice defensive mechanic. Enemies don't have a lot of crit multiplier, so lowering it a bit makes crits not much more worse than normal hits, which is nice. The main thing about this Overwhelm node, though, is that first line, which is a bit of a game changer. This effect sets your base critical strike chance for weapon attacks at 8%. This is a pretty high amount for a base crit on a weapon, and it completely overrides your weapon's crit stat. This frees up suffixes that scale crit chance and gives you more versatility in base weapon choice, but it does more than that as well. It literally makes any weapon good for crit. At worst, it makes an exquisite blade 8% instead of 6% without needing a crit chance suffix. Okay, that's alright, I guess. But it can do a lot more than that, like for example making Quill Rain a viable crit weapon, or even making Starforge a good crit weapon. All of a sudden, a ton of 5% crit chance weapons become 8%, which is a pretty good base to build from. Your crit chance with these weapons might go from something like being 50% to 80%, and that's a huge difference. This node alone will prompt some interesting exploration into making crit builds with weapons that you never would have considered in the past. On a completely unrelated note, Lionized Glare Bow Slayers are probably going to be pretty damn good, by the way. So moving up into the left of the tree, the Headsman and Bane of Legends nodes have seen a pretty big rework. The first node, Headsman, still gives physical reflect immunity, and now gives less damage on kill, but it now gives 20% more damage against bosses. More damage against bosses is the best conditional damage you can ask for, really, because that's when you actually need it. Bane of Legends behind Headsman still has that powerful 20% culling strike effect, which is great, but the onslaught on killing a rare or boss has been replaced with a much nicer effect. You now get 20% attack speed for 20 seconds on killing a rare or unique enemy. It doesn't really do much for bosses because, there's nothing around the boss after you've killed them normally. But while you're clearing the map and killing rares, that'll be up a lot of the time with that 20-second duration. And then you also get 20% movement speed for 20 seconds on killing any enemy. And with that duration and just the fact that it's any enemy, that means that's going to be up all the time. So it's pretty damn good for clear speed. It's a big clear speed buff, and now that it's not Onslaught, you can stack this with Onslaught from another effect, like a Silver Flask or the Support Gem. This is definitely a big usefulness buff to the node. The Headsman's Bane of Legends 4-point line is generally a good choice in any attack build for its combination of clear speed and boss killing along with Fizz Reflect immunity. You can't really go wrong with this line. Up in the top right, the Leech line has been changed a bit too. The stun immunity effect Slayer had on its old stun node has been lost, but is replaced here on the Endless Hunger node, which in my opinion is in a better spot. This is now stun immunity while leeching. You still get the Overkill Leech and Bleed immunity as well. You're pretty much always going to be leeching when fighting stuff unless you're literally AFK, so this is pretty effective stun immunity, especially if paired with the node behind it. And on that note, Brutal Fervor behind it has lost its leech scaling effect, but gained attack speed while leeching, as well as a bit of extra increased attack damage while leeching. It still has that overleech effect that allows your leech to continue working after you've reached full life. There has been some dismay due to the leech changes in the past about how this is much weaker than it once was, and that is undeniably true. The days of insane Slayer leech are gone, but I'd still argue that this overleech effect on Slayer is still very, very good. This gives you powerful recovery that kicks in the moment you take damage while you're fighting, with enough leeway to reposition or back off if needed and still have that going for a little while afterwards. Don't underestimate the power of this effect, though with the loss of leech effectiveness scaling, you may want to consider getting some leech scaling from other sources to leverage the effect to its greater potential. Moving on down, Impact used to be the melee splash node, but it's been completely reworked and no longer provides a melee splash effect. This makes sense because all melee attacks, even things like Double Strike, now have a built-in attack cone area sort of thing that hits all the monsters within it. And this effect is being scaled by weapon range as well. This video from ZiggyD demonstrates the extent of this change, and it looks pretty exciting. If you're trying to turn a single target melee skill into an AoE for some reason, then you may still want to use another source of melee splash, like the gem for example, but I suspect that Ancestral Call might be good enough by itself now with the way the attack system has been changed. Might need a bit more testing to say for sure. That aside, Impact is redesigned to work with the new way attacks work in PoE, and it gives 50% increased accuracy, 2+ melee range, up to 50% increased AoE based on enemies killed recently, and up to 15% more damage to enemies close to you. This node works for a lot of things now, just generally speaking. The weapon range and pretty huge AoE will make it good for many things like Cyclone, but it'll also be a good choice for single target skills and boss killing as well. Honestly, it's a pretty generically good melee node, and I think it's competitive enough with some of the other choices, though it's actually going to be a tough choice between this and, say, Bane of Legends for its clear speed and culling strike effects. Slayer overall is getting to be a little bit tough on the choices because all of these are pretty generally good. That said, lastly, there is a new standalone node down the bottom right called Masterful Form. This gives charge duration for frenzy and endurance charges and makes your maximum endurance charges equal to your maximum potential frenzy charges. This is what I would call a cute node, but it is pretty niche. Slayer doesn't have a built-in way to generate charges, and you won't have any great ways to generate endurance charges in boss fights to take advantage of the new max that you've got if you've been stacking frenzy charges as well. The best I see is like a frenzy stacking clear speed build that generates endurance charges through Warlord's Mark for clearing, but honestly, other classes do that playstyle better, be it like a Raider or a Deadeye or something. Though Raider probably needs a bit of a rework, that's another topic for later. I don't really think many builds will take this node, but I mean, it's a free new node, so no bitching, I guess. Overall, Slayer is kind of generic in the sense that most of its effects work well with almost any attack build, bows or melee. And now with its powerful new crit node and changes to be less two-handed weapon oriented, it's got a lot more to offer. There's not really a strong theme here with Slayer. The theme is, I guess, killing stuff and blood. That's fine because its general application to a lot of builds gives some pretty tough choices between nodes. It's quite well done in that regard, and Overwhelm opens up new crit builds, and it's just pretty powerful overall. Its genericness, I would say, is well executed genericness, and I'm pretty excited by how good it is going to be for bows as well as melee. So, Slayer was pretty damn good. How about that Berserker? Our all-time favorite Descendancy. But don't worry, it's looking pretty meaty now. Flawless Savagery used to be a savage hit leech thing. That's all gone now. Now it's the beginning of a rather curious crit 4-point line with Blitz. Flawless Savagery now gives crit chance, crit multi, and 20 to 30 added flat physical damage to attacks if you've crit recently. This is about half of an Abyssus amount of flat physical damage, which is a lot if you've used Abyssus, but without the drawback. This is pretty good for everything, but it's especially good for things that scale really well off of added flat physical damage like Doom Fletcher's Prism and crit Facebreaker builds. Blitz is a new node that tails off of Flawless Savagery that gives a max of 20 Blitz charges, which don't do anything by themselves. You gain Blitz charges on critical strike. For each Blitz charge, you gain 2% more attack speed and 10% reduced critical strike chance. So at max, that's 40% more attack speed and 200 reduced crit chance. Considering Flawless Savagery in the two minor nodes gives 110% increased crit chance, you're only losing 90% at max Blitz charges, all things considered. 40% more attack speed for 90% crit chance lost is a pretty easy trade-off, and barely even I would consider a trade-off. A ton of flat fears and attack speed is almost good enough that this might be worth it even just using crit as an activator for these effects and not scaling it that much if it proves to be an efficient way to build your character. But certainly it's also good as a crit build line with added damage and attack speed as huge benefits. This line is certainly good enough to see use. The main question will be if you want them more than some of the other nodes Berserker is now offering. And on that note, moving right a little, the standalone Warbringer node loses its rage generation on Warcry use, which is not that big a deal now, as the game will have extra rage generation skills and rage is being reworked in general. The life gain and Warcry duration and speed is still there, but it's now got a little party bonus that gives some attack speed and damage to you and nearby allies when you use a Warcry. This is nice, but nothing major overall. It's still a pretty good node if you don't mind spamming the Warcries, and I always thought it was decent enough to warrant consideration. Number 8, Pain Reaver still has the Life and Mana Leech, which is okay. These are not that hard to get on attack builds, generally speaking, through other sources like the passive tree or gear, but this node can be convenient in some cases. It lost the added leech bonus on kill, which was kind of whatever, but gained 25% attack speed if you've been hit recently, and leech scaling if you've taken a savage hit recently. Leech scaling occasionally and a hefty attack speed bonus that is up most of the time is a pretty good buff to the node, and better than the lost raw leech was in my opinion. Berserker has pretty limited defensive nodes by design, and this and the Warcry healing effect is basically it. It makes sense that it's only somewhat decent as a defensive mechanic, since Berserker is supposed to be all offense with limited survivability, but you do have Pain Reaver here as an option if you want to offset that downside of Berserker somewhat. Mostly you'll still be getting your main survivability from gear and the tree, or just kill stuff before it can kill you, which always sometimes works. Next up, Crave the Slaughter, the first point in the Rage line, has been completely reworked as well. It lost its Rage on killing enemies and Rage gain on bosses and rares, which makes sense the way Rage is being reworked and extended out to skills outside of the Ascendancy. The focus for Berserker and Rage is now on scaling and leveraging Rage, which is now a wider game mechanic overall. As such, Crave gives you Rage on hit with attacks with a cooldown of 0.3 seconds. Since Rage has a cap of 50, this takes 15 seconds by itself to get to the cap. So that's a pretty long time, but I think the idea here is that it's more about keeping your Rage stacks high throughout the map. You'll likely do the bulk of your Rage generation through other means when you need to do so, and Crave should do a good job of keeping your Rage topped up. There's another new bonus that gives 1% chance to deal double damage per 4 Rage. That's 12% double damage chance at 50 stacks, rounded down, which is effectively a 12% more damage multiplier averaged out. This node gives you a decent bit of extra damage and then should do a good job of keeping your rage stacks as close to cap as possible, which is a bunch of increased attack damage, attack speed, and movement speed from the base rage effects. Solid. Rite of Ruin is the second rage node, and it's important to remind you here that rage has been reworked and no longer has a damage over time effect by default. This node restores the damage over time effect in a much more manageable way, however. It degens you 0.1% of your max life per second per rage stack while you're not losing rage stacks. So while you're actively generating and maintaining rage stacks, you will degen a max of 5% life per second. This hurts a bit, but it is pretty easily offset with just a few points of regen on the tree or gear, and by leeching when you're fighting. And then the degen turns off the moment you start losing stacks of rage, which is after 0.5 seconds of not generating rage. So you're really only ever degenning when in combat itself, which is when you're likely leeching anyway. You probably won't even notice this degen a lot of the time, it's very manageable. But why take the downside in the first place? Well, Rite of Ruin gives you stun immunity at 25 stacks of rage, which is pretty good, and it triples the effects of rage. These are only the built-in effects of rage, by the way, not the degen and double damage from Crave the Slaughter. That would be a little ridiculous. To put this in perspective, at 50 stacks of rage, this is 150% increased attack damage, 75% attack speed, and 30% movement speed. The node itself is giving you 100% attack damage, 50% attack speed, and 20% movement speed over the default effect of rage at 50 stacks. That's a pretty good node. And lastly, just quickly, Aspect of Carnage is still the same, 10% increased damage taken for 40% more damage dealt. It's damage at the cost of being dead sometimes, no change here. Overall, Berserker is an Ascendancy that can give you something like 60% attack speed extra, and then multiply that and all your other attack speed increases by 40% more attack speed. That alone is kind of insane to think about. But he's also got some decent crit with big added flat physical damage, support for maintaining high rage, and then multiplying those effects. Pretty juicy stuff. It's still a big, dumb damage Ascendancy with very little defensive power within the Ascendancy itself, but it does that concept better than ever now, and much faster than ever before. To more fully assess the potency of Berserker, I feel like we need more info on the rage generating and expending skills, as they'll tie in pretty heavily with the Slaughter line's efficacy, but even in a vacuum, this is a pretty beefy looking Ascendancy for quick, big damage. Anyway, folks, I'm curious to know what you guys think. Any of these looking like League starters for you? Personally, I'm really excited to play Melee first in Legion, but Slayer especially is oddly enough getting me really excited for the idea of playing bows in Legion, which I wasn't expecting. I mean, this is supposed to be a Melee expansion, and I'm getting excited about bows. Maybe some sort of juicy bow Slayer will have to be my second build of the League. We'll see how it goes. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.